Good morning, Monique.
Good morning.
Okay. You got the recording?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to start off by welcoming everyone. Today we will be discussing moral muteness and ethical blindness. By the end of the training, you should have a better understanding of what moral muteness and ethical blindness is, the consequences, and the impact they have, as well as some strategies to overcome. So what is moral muteness? Moral muteness refers to situations where people remain silent or fail to speak up when they witness unethical behavior. It is a conscious decision where a person knows what is right, but refuses to voice or act on their concerns. It can also occur when people communicate in ways that obscure their moral beliefs and commitments. What is that recording at the top on? So now we're going to look at an example of moral muteness. So when we see others acting unethically, often the easiest thing to do is to look the other way. Studies show that less than half of those who witness organizational wrongdoing report it. To speak out risks conflict, and we tend to avoid conflict because we pay an emotional and social cost for it. For example, in one study, psychologist Harold Sakujian planted fur coats, cameras, and TVs inside 310 locked cars in New York City. He sent a team of volunteers to break into the cars and steal the valuables, asking the thieves to act in an obviously suspicious manner. About 3,500 people witnessed the break-ins, but only 9 people took any kind of action. Of those who spoke up, 5 were policemen. Only a relatively small percentage of people who see wrongdoing speak up. But if we wish to be ethical people, we must strive to combat moral muteness in all areas of our lives. So now we're going to watch a short video.
We know problems occur when people don't see ethical issues, and there are also problems that develop when people know deep down that something is wrong, but they find some way to rationalize not speaking up about it. Scholars Frederick Bird and James Waters refer to this as moral muteness. Moral muteness is when people either don't voice moral sentiments or they communicate in ways that obscure their moral beliefs and commitments. In a study of people working in advertising agencies, Patrick Murphy and I found that moral muteness was supported by a number of rationalizations. And we think that these rationalizations are applicable to business more generally. For example, one common rationalization was that ethics is bad for business. As one person said, if you bring up ethics, people will think that you don't have business savvy. They say, if you're going to talk like that, go run a church.
In campus-wide elections, we have an election code. Things range from you can't spend over a certain amount of money, you can't talk to certain people about your campaign before a certain date. The main reason I stayed silent was because I wanted to win. We all want to win.
The fact of the matter is, when push comes to shove, many people would prefer to win than to be ethical. But this is often a short-term approach that can actually hurt both the individual and the organization in the long term.
In one of the organizations I'm in here on campus, there is a very strong subculture that is not in line at all with what I feel like is the mission of our organization. I guess by the university's definition, there has been some hazing over the past couple of years, and I think that's despicable. It's difficult for me to speak up because these are my friends, one, and I don't want any harm to come to them. I value my relationships with these people, and I don't want to affect those adversely. But it's also difficult because if the administration was to find out what we do, even if it's unofficial, that could lead to potentially our kicking off campus.
Moral muteness can be supported by another kind of rationalization that involves a competing goal, something that seems like a higher good that trumps moral concerns. But usually, the analysis of the other goal is superficial. For example, the rationalization, "the client is always right," can lead to a pleaseaholic syndrome in which you don't tell your client things they don't want to hear. Like moral concerns, there's a big difference in a trusted business advisor and a pleaseaholic. Trusted business advisors sometimes have to give uncomfortable advice in order to do their jobs well. Pleaseaholics may feel like they're doing their jobs well in the short term, but in the long run, research shows that a different type of relationship is more productive and more profitable.
I had a friend who did that for money at some point, wrote essays for other people, and I turned a blind eye to it because I know the right thing would be, oh, I should turn this into the disciplinary counsel or the omnibus person or somebody at the university. I was trying to rationalize this is the higher good, is that they are doing something to put themselves through school, not thinking about, the unethicalness of the person who's buying the paper not actually earning their grades, or them messing up the system or ruining the credibility of undergraduate students overall.
Self-interest is a particularly compelling rationalization that can mute moral concerns. And rationalizations related to self-interest can take many forms, such as, "I don't want to rock the boat because I could make some enemies." "I need to be seen as a team player rather than a tattletale." "I don't want to mess with a winning formula." Often, rationalizations such as these frame self-interest in short-term rather than long-term ways.
So in my theater class last semester, we had these take-home quizzes that we completed over Blackboard. The whole issue for me was, are you allowed to use your notes on this take-home exam when the teacher doesn't clarify whether or not she expects that you take this by yourself or not? So then that's where the rationalizations of ethics come in. Well, she knows if it's a take-home exam, then people are gonna use their notes. She has to know that. You don't want to rock the boat. If you rock the boat too much, then you don't get to be in the boat anymore. They throw you out.
Probably if I knew someone was struggling with some sort of ethical thing about reporting someone for unethical behavior, probably the first thing I'd be telling them would be to check to make sure to protect yourself, honestly.
One way to avoid moral muteness, obviously, is to make a habit of talking about issues with people whom we trust. When we raise concern, we can position ourselves as someone who's trying to help the organization, to protect it from problems, rather than as someone who is trying to slap hands or judge. Often making persuasive arguments by illustrating the potential consequences for individuals and for the organization can be helpful. And it's important to view our role as that of a trusted business advisor, an indispensable professional in any organization.
People have a very cynical view of the world, and I think that is what needs to change. People need to believe that people have the best of intentions, and a lot of times they don't, which is why it's so hard.
There's a massive internal conflict, and it's me balancing what I know is right versus my relationships with people.
As easy as it is to talk about it in a business class, in a case in terms of a company, or in the terms of conducting this interview, oh, I would definitely stand up. It's a completely different thing when you're actually put into that situation.
A lot of times the benefit goes beyond, oh, I was able to stand up for what I believe in, or I was able to stick up for myself. There's more benefit than that. You're setting an example for other people.
One person could change the world, and one person can be brave and stand up for what they believe in, and people will listen.
So why does moral muteness occur? Fear of conflict or retaliation. When we see others acting unethically, often the easiest thing to do is to look the other way. This is because speaking up can be difficult and uncomfortable, especially if it means going against the group or risking social disapproval. Individuals may believe speaking up won't make a difference. Desire for conformity. Social pressure to conform to a group's norms or values may lead individuals to remain silent on ethical issues, even if they privately disagree with the group's stance. And moral disengagement. In some cases, individuals may not feel personally responsible for ethical issues or they might rationalize their behavior by downplaying the consequences or shifting blame to others. So what are the consequences of moral muteness? Encouraging unethical behavior. When people do not speak up against unethical behavior, it can encourage others to continue their actions, leading to a toxic environment. Loss of trust. When people remain silent, it can erode trust and lead to a lack of transparency and accountability. Negative impact on mental health. Individuals who choose to remain silent may experience feelings of guilt, shame, and anxiety, as they may feel complicit in the unethical behavior. And there may be legal and financial implications. In some cases, remaining silent can have legal and financial consequences, such as fines or lawsuits. Now we're going to discuss some strategies to overcome moral muteness. We start with recognizing the problem. The first step in overcoming moral muteness is to acknowledge its existence. Recognize that staying silent can have negative consequences and that speaking up is essential. Next is building confidence. Building confidence is essential to overcoming moral muteness. Practice speaking up in safe environments, such as with friends or family, to help build your confidence. Followed by identifying allies. Identify individuals who share your values and beliefs and are willing to speak up against unethical behavior. Surround yourself with people who support your actions and those who can help you overcome moral muteness. And our last strategy is to develop a plan. Develop a plan for how you will respond to unethical behavior in advance. This can help you respond quickly and confidently when the situation arises. So now we're going to talk about ethical blindness and how it relates to moral muteness. The connection between moral muteness and ethical blindness is their shared tendency to neglect ethical concerns. Moral muteness can reinforce and perpetuate ethical blindness. When individuals or organizations remain mute, avoiding ethical discussions or failing to raise ethical concerns, it contributes to an environment where ethical blindness thrives. The absence of dialogue and open communication about ethical issues makes it easier for ethical issues to be overlooked or disregarded. So what is ethical blindness? Ethical blindness is the inability or unwillingness to recognize ethical issues in a given situation or to act on them appropriately. Ethical blindness is an unconscious action where a person disregards their ethics due to pressure or a pursuit of an outcome they feel is ethical. It involves a lack of awareness, sensitivity, or willingness to address ethical concerns, resulting in potential harm to individuals, communities, or society as a whole. What causes ethical blindness? Contextual pressure is a major cause of ethical blindness. Contextual pressure refers to external factors that may influence an individual or organization's decision-making process. When individuals or organizations are under significant pressure, they are more likely to engage in unethical behavior or overlook ethical issues. This pressure can override a person's values. A good example is the Wells Fargo fake account scandal. Wells Fargo employees were pushed to engage in aggressive cross-selling of accounts. Their quotas were set at high levels, and they faced discipline and even dismissal if they did not meet those quotas. Under pressure, employees sold customers on services they could not afford and even set up accounts and applied for loans without their customers' consent. Wells Fargo ended up firing 5,000 people for fraud. When you examine the salespeople's testimonials during the U.S. congressional hearing, it's apparent that these employees were not criminals. There were thousands of employees who were under so much pressure and in so much fear that they saw no other option than to commit fraud to meet those quotas. To prevent ethical blindness in the face of contextual pressure, it's important for individuals and organizations to prioritize ethical considerations and establish clear guidelines and policies. So here are some common signs of ethical blindness. The first sign is lack of ethical consideration. One of the primary signs of ethical blindness is the absence of ethical consideration in the decision-making process. Ethically blind individuals or organizations may overlook or downplay ethical concerns, focusing solely on personal gain, financial benefits, or short-term goals. The next sign is rationalization of unethical behavior. Ethically blind individuals often rationalize or justify unethical decisions. They may employ excuses such as everyone does it, or the ends justify the means to minimize the ethical implications of their behavior. Another sign is inconsistent application of ethical standards. Ethically blind individuals may exhibit inconsistencies in applying ethical standards. They may hold different ethical expectations for themselves compared to others, or selectively enforce ethical guidelines based on personal bias or convenience. Next is lack of accountability. Ethically blind environments often lack clear accountability mechanisms or fail to enforce consequences of unethical behavior. This can create a culture where unethical behavior is tolerated or even encouraged. Followed by lack of transparency. Ethically blind individuals may avoid disclosing information or actively conceal relevant facts to manipulate outcomes or avoid scrutiny. This lack of transparency can hinder accountability and foster an environment prone to unethical behavior. And lastly, we have lack of empathy. Ethical blindness can manifest a lack of empathy towards others who may be affected by one's decisions or actions. There is a failure to consider the perspectives and feelings of those impacted, leading to decisions that prioritize personal gain or convenience over the well-being of others. Recognizing these signs in oneself or others can serve as a starting point for developing ethical awareness and addressing ethical blind spots effectively.
Now we are going to talk about the impact and consequences of ethical blindness. Ethical blindness can have significant consequences for individuals, organizations, and society. The first is erosion of trust. When ethical considerations are neglected or disregarded, it leads to a loss of confidence in the integrity and credibility of those involved. Next, we have reputational damage. Ethical blindness can lead to severe reputational damage. Instances of unethical behavior, when exposed or discovered, can tarnish reputations, resulting in negative public perception, decreased customer loyalty, and potential loss of business opportunities. Ethical blindness can also lead to decreased employee engagement and morale. Ethical blindness can create a culture of fear and mistrust, which can lead to decreased productivity. When employees perceive lack of ethical consideration or witness unethical behavior, it can erode their motivation, job satisfaction, and commitment to the organization's goals and values. So, what are our takeaways? Recognizing and addressing ethical blindness is essential to mitigate these consequences. By cultivating ethical awareness, promoting ethical leadership, and fostering a culture of integrity and accountability, individuals and organizations can work together, preventing the harmful effects of ethical blindness and building a more ethical and sustainable future. Preventing ethical blindness starts with individual commitment and self-awareness. We're going to talk about some strategies to help you prevent ethical blindness. The first strategy is to reflect on personal values. Take time to reflect on your personal values and ethical principles that guide your decision-making. Consider how your values align with the potential ethical dilemmas you may face. Reflecting on your values will help you develop a moral compass to help navigate ethical challenges. The second strategy is to engage in ethical decision-making processes. When faced with ethical dilemmas, take a systematic approach to decision-making. Identify those involved, evaluate the potential impacts of your decision, and consider alternative solutions. Consult ethical guidelines, codes of conduct, or relevant professional standards. Engage in a structured decision-making process can help you make more objective and ethically sound choices. The third strategy is to seek diverse perspectives. Actively seek out diverse perspectives on ethical issues. Engage in conversation with people who have different backgrounds, experiences, and viewpoints to broaden your understanding and challenge your own biases. The fourth strategy is to be mindful of contextual pressures. Be aware of contextual pressures that may influence your ethical judgment, such as time constraints, financial considerations, or social expectations. Take a step back and critically evaluate whether these pressures are compromising your ethical judgment. The fifth strategy is to act with integrity. Lead by example and consistently act in accordance with your ethical principles. Make conscious choices that align with your values and uphold ethical standards, even when faced with difficult or challenging situations. And lastly, be accountable and learn from mistakes. Accept accountability for your decisions and actions. If you make an unethical choice, acknowledge it, learn from it, and take steps to rectify the situation. Embrace the opportunity to grow and improve your ethical decision-making skills through self-reflection and continuous learning. We'll now talk about the case study on the Astros sign stealing scandal. In September 2016, an Astros intern named Derek Bagoa gave a PowerPoint presentation to General Manager Jeff Lundnow that featured an Excel-based application that was programmed with an algorithm. The algorithm was designed to and could decode the pitching signs that opposing team catchers flashed to their pitchers. The Astros called it Code Breaker. One Astros employee referred to the sign stealing system that evolved as the dark arts. Major League Baseball rules allowed a runner standing on second base to steal signs and relay them to the batter, but the MLB rules strictly forbid the use of electronic means to decipher signs. So the way Code Breaker worked was simple. Someone would watch an in-game live feed and log the catcher signal into the spreadsheet, as well as the type of pitch that was actually thrown. With that information, Code Breaker determined how the signs corresponded with different pitches. Once deciphered, that information would be communicated through intermediaries to a base runner who would relay them to a hitter. Starting around June of 2017, the system was embellished by Astro players. They started watching a live game feed on monitors near the dugout and then would bang on a trash can to communicate the coming pitch to the batter. The banging scheme lasted through the 2017 World Series, which the Astros won over the Los Angeles Dodgers. The Astros continued to steal signs into the 2018 season, despite the fact that other teams were very suspicious that the Astros were stealing their signs. Other teams often changed their own signals several times a game in an attempt to thwart the Astros' suspected sign stealing. In 2019, the Astros again made it to the World Series as the heavy favorites were beaten by the Washington Nationals. They won, at least in part, by assuming that the Astros would be attempting to steal their signs and putting into place elaborate countermeasures, including multiple sets of signs for each pitch. The scandal became public on November 12, 2019, when former Astros pitcher Mike Fierro blew the whistle in an interview published in The Athletic. Although some current MLB players praised Fiers for coming forward at the time about the scandal, other players criticized him for violating baseball's presumed code of silence, also called the Clubhouse Code. In the Major League Baseball then launched an investigation that granted the Astro players immunity in return for their cooperation. Commissioner Rob Manfred soon issued a 9-page report that found that most of the Astro players knew of the scheme and many participated in it. The report said that manager A.J. Hinch knew of the scheme and that GM Jeff Lindau should have prevented it. Commissioner Manfred suspended both Hinch and Lindau, who were quickly fired by Astros owner Jim Crane. Major League Baseball fined the Astros $5 million and stripped the club of its first and second round draft picks in both 2020 and 2021. In 2017, The Athletic reported that small groups of Astro players expressed misgivings about the cheating. One player approached Carlos Beltran, who was a ringleader in the scheme and a 20-year veteran with a Hall of Fame caliber career behind him. Beltran disregarded their concerns and steamrolled everybody. Beltran would be the only Astros player to be implicated by name in the MLB report and on the cheating scandal. So now we have some questions for you for some discussion. So our first question is, what role do you think moral muteness played in the Astros cheating scandal?
I think it's pretty obvious that with the breadth of the organization and the number of players involved, that they're all in the same boat, as referenced in the initial video, that, you know, if you start to rock the boat or cause an issue, then you're out of the boat.
They participated in ethical blindness, because what they did, they rationalized the unethical behavior for themselves. And so as it played into moral muteness, they rationalized that for their own self-interest, the best self-interest of the team itself. And they didn't want it, the whole notion of, I don't want to rock the boat and I don't want to be seen as not being a team player.
I think it's interesting too in that case study how not only was, whenever concerns were brought up within the Astros about the cheating, those players were shut down, but also whenever it became widely known, when it was reported through The Athletic, other people on other teams in Major League Baseball criticized the Fiers for reporting it and saying, that he should have kept quiet about it, that it was part of baseball to keep it quiet. So what role do you think moral blindness played in the Astros cheating scandal? What role do you think ethical blindness played in the Astros cheating scandal?
This is Monique, I'm sorry. I think that the role moral blindness played in the Astros cheating scandal was one of the clear signs of ethical blindness, that they had lack of ethical considerations. They knew that it was wrong, but but because it was an inconsistent application of the ethical standards across the board, that they showed a lack of accountability, and that they rationalize that unethical behavior within that whole scheme.
With it too, you also have to look at the pressure that these men's league baseball players are under, the pressure to perform. That could have been an issue as to why they engaged in ethical blindness as well.
So why do you think Mike Fiers was criticized by some for revealing the cheating?
He messed up a good thing. They were winning.
I think it speaks to that probably there were other teams in Major League Baseball at the time that were either using similar systems but were cheating in other ways. And they were afraid, if they come, whatever they come down on the Astros, if they catch us too, they're probably going to come down on us as well, is why they kind of criticized him.
Yeah, why wouldn't you think that? Why wouldn't a team or individual on a team not think that other teams, given the tools available, not do the same thing?
Yeah.
I do wonder how applicable this example will be moving forward, given that in October of last year, there was some research that came out of Cornell about algorithms being developed and used to predict with 80% accuracy the movement of volleyball and hockey players. And so it's one of those things that as technology and standards change, I guess, in terms of sports, politics, that it would just, at one point, Astros were fine. 50 years down the road, everybody uses algorithms. Why wouldn't we?
All right, so we'll move on to our takeaways. Moral muteness can have severe consequences. Encouraging open dialogue and creating an environment where ethical concerns can be discussed freely can help address moral muteness. By acknowledging the problem, building confidence, identifying allies, developing a plan, and seeking support, individuals can overcome moral muteness and create a culture of accountability and transparency. Preventing ethical blindness is an ongoing process that requires commitment, self-awareness, and a willingness to continuously learn and grow. By integrating these strategies into your personal and professional life, you can develop a heightened ethical awareness. So does anyone have any other questions or any conversation they would like to add?
I got a couple of points. One, I guess for just kind of fodder here, and like to get folks' feedback on this, because I feel like we've had a discussion regarding the difference between morality and morals and ethics, and then that I think on that other training we had, morality is subjective. So how can one's morality or blindness or what have you, if they believe and feel the way they believe, which is different than somebody else, how does that inform the ethical side of how actions are carried out? Because then they could justify, well, my morals tell me this, and that makes, if A is my morals, then it makes B okay in terms of how I ethically conduct myself.
But Joey, if your morals are skewed, if you're looking through your moral compass and it's totally convergent, it's different than what the code should be, then how's that work out?
Well, that point. There's a code. Who agrees upon that code? Did I agree upon a code with you about morality? So that's where it's subjective, and in terms of society, I look at, well, I can justify and my behavior of what I do, because when you say skewed according to Hugh, because it's my morality. I view it this way. I'm not skewed. You're skewed.
Hey, this is Eden. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think when it comes to points like that, as far as I think part of the importance of an organization setting those standards and setting that or adopting those, that code of ethics or things like that. And then you can match up, whether your morals, kind of are parallel to what that organization puts out. That's how I see it anyway, is if your ethics doesn't match up to what the code of ethics that your organization puts out, then, maybe that's just not the place that you should be, because I get what you're saying, but I think it just all depends on, does it match up with the organization that you're there to represent or be a part of? So that's just my take.
Well, let me counter y'all with an example here that was played out at the highest level, one of the highest levels of government, one of the branches of government for this nation, and it had to do with I don't know if it was Trump's first or second impeachment trial, in which he ultimately wasn't convicted in the Senate, and it's all political, but our organization is political. And Alan Dershowitz, when arguing for why Trump, I think it was the first one, it was on the Ukraine quid pro quo. And one of his arguments was that if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of quid pro quo that results in impeachment. And if a president does something, if he's trying to do something of which he feels is in the public interest, like get elected, then it's not a problem. And that was an argument that ultimately, led to him not being convicted. And so, again, that's that whole morality thing. Well, if I'm doing it because I say it's part of some interest or even part of my organization's interest, then it can't be wrong.
Right. And I think sometimes that's the struggle that people have that work in, ethics is just that point, because there is a lot of gray area sometimes, because it's kind of based off of your own personality, I guess. But I see what you're saying.
And I was going to say, the way that I always think of the two is kind of like what Eden said. When we're thinking about ethics, we're thinking about, with us, with like rules that we have in the code of ethics. When I think about morality, I think of it's more personal. That can vary. Like, I may be religious, but Dawn may not. Like, that's going to vary from person to person. So it's going to be more subjective, whereas ethics tends to be more objective and can change.
On another point too, then I'd like just a question I'd like to propose is how is moral muteness impacted by the lack of action or perceived lack of action by a regulatory body? So say if you're an organization and your internal audit, and you submit a complaint or whatnot, and it doesn't come out as perceived as one would think, or then it's in the public sphere and it don't come out like, it seems like morally this person shouldn't have done that, but internal audit determined this. How does a regulatory body's actions carry weight in terms of contributing to moral muteness or ethical blindness?
I think one of the things that we have to look at it, is we have to look at our standards, but just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should do something. And if it's right. And if it's right, yeah.
Well, isn't that subjective?
Well, and I'll say this too, speaking from internal audit, what we do as well is we have these conversations with a set of people. We actually have an ethics review committee, which is made up of enrolled members from each of the townships. And so they sit in and weigh in on these ethical issues as well. It's not just a conversation between myself and Sheena, our office staff. We also have those members of the community come in whenever we have an ethics complaint. And we use them and let them look at it with our own ethical lenses and our own experiences to help us make the determination of, is this an ethical violation?
Yeah, again, I understand, working with our rep here in Wolftown, and they come and give us updates. I would say that actually a bit undermines that standing and foundation of which y'all operate on. And if organization brings in just community members, I know it's like, bringing in the jury, which is made up of a body of peers. But then say you look at a community's foundational fabric, and in terms of morality, the religious beliefs can all be based in one area, but then how does that contribute to reviewing and analyzing a particular case when they're all looking through the same lens that doesn't, and I could just play devil's advocate and say doesn't reflect the larger body of a community, minority points of view.
This is Sharon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good deal. Also want to add that it's not just the Ethics Review Committee. We have a secondary level, the Audit and Ethics Committee. So once the Ethics Review Committee looks at a complaint, it has to go to that higher committee before anything's affirmed from an ethical violation standpoint. But as Eden mentioned, you know, these are challenges that we're going to always be faced with, and it's just evaluating each situation on a case-by-case basis.
Is there any other questions or comments before we wrap up? No?
Appreciate the dialogue.
Well, thank you guys for attending. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for letting me poke at you.
No problem, Joey.
Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
You.